full the river is when there's nothing really flowing back there. Really, it's a very small stream.
I mean, that's at extremely low water.
Yeah,
But again, yeah, when we talk about climate change, everybody's talking about big rainstorms. It could be no rainstorms too.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty good,
No snow in the winter.
Nobody's saying no.
it's not in Maine or.
we'll
not-
have
not-
periods of drought, is that
Oh,
what you
yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
It will be, yeah, I think that was a pretty good example of sort of the low water.
Yeah.
Well,
We
yeah,
had
yeah,
rain for about
right,
2 weeks
yeah.
before it.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts? We're just talking about the visit to the dam
Mhm.
last meeting, whether there's feedback or comments about that. Revelations,
I have none that others haven't already said,
okay.
except that it seemed like there was plenty of sediment and my shoes are still covered in it.
Now, not just plenty of that, there's a lot of weird
Schmutz.
objects
Yeah.
down there too. Definitely some schmutz.
Yes.
I'm curious, was it worth doing?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad we did it. It's good to get some photos underneath there too, so if I thought somebody had a real camera. I had some that I took that was
Yeah, maybe we can
good.
put our photos on like Google Drive or somewhere. Be good to do a newsletter on this as well. Roll backdrop. Maybe.
I printed this and then conveniently left it on my desk. I do that all the time. I feel like
Okay, I think we're moving on to town manager updates and Audra has a review of the high hazard dam situation.
Yeah, so, I was thinking that a lot of this might be better to do on site because it's really difficult to try to explain what's going on there without being able to show everybody and have a look at, you know, the different dams and the pieces of them and where there are, you know, sort of, issues that need to be addressed. Part of this project was, an assessment of all the different dams and all the different segments of the river. And in the summer, I went with Mike Burke and an engineer from Kleinschmidt, and they're, you know, really the like the structural dam engineers that do all of our required assessments by the Maine Emergency Management Association to you know, just make sure that they're structurally sound, and if there are any issues with them, it's marked down in the report, and we're given a certain time frame that we need to you know, do different things to remediate problems that, you know, could cause structural issues and failure. Just making sure that they're, you know, they're kept up over the years. So the point of having Kleinschmidt there was to sort of look at, you know, what could be done to make them you know, function better, considering some of the resilience goals of the project. So, you know, for example, when we started at the East West Dam and we worked downstream, and really the focus was mostly on the high hazard dams because they're the ones with the biggest level of risk. We have to do emergency action plans for them every 2 years actually. So, you know, making sure that we update our EAPs and just looking at opportunities to, you know, make them more resilient and so that they could do certain things like East and West dams. You know, they were originally built to power mills that aren't there anymore, but we still have all the same mechanisms there now. In terms of like the gate and the size of them and where they're located. And there's a real expectation that those dams are going to help with lake level management and particularly flood control. And I think that the storm that we had in May 6th of 2023 was a really good example of how those dams are not able to provide any sort of flood control function because you really need to open them. The gates are very, very small and they need to be opened so far in advance and drawn down to a pretty significant level to really provide any flood storage capacity within the lake. And that takes a long time. So it can take, you know, weeks to draw them down for a storm where you're dealing with like inches of rain in a very short amount of time. So, you know, we looked at things like enlarging the size of the gate, the enlarging the spillway on the east dam. So, when we go on site, you'll see that the east dam has a very, very small spillway. And if you compare that to like the Seabright Dam, which is much larger, and it had to be larger at one point because it was a hydropower dam. That's kind of one of the reasons why there's some, capacity problems at that dam. So it'd be looking at things like enlarging the spillway, enlarging the gate. If that happens, then maybe we could get rid of the gate on the west dam. And so that's just sort of like more of a, an earthen dam situation. So there's a lot of different options for things that we could do if we're, actually fixing those so they serve some of the purpose that they're serving now, as opposed to dams that were set up to function more to power mills.
Which one's the one that's closer to Beaucaire?
That's the east.
That's east.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, all those types of options. So that's a report that's going to come out of all of this is Kleinschmidt and Interfluve kind of costing out what that'll look like. So, with the high hazard dams, even before we started doing this project, we knew that there was a lot of investment that needed to be made into them, particularly the east and the west dams. So the west dam just recently had the gate replaced, and it had some cribbing work done on, because it's the spillway is wood. Most of our dams, it's a concrete spillway, but it's different with the west dam. So there were some carrying timbers and things like structural things that had been repaired on the west dam. But the east dam, we knew back even in 2017 that we were looking at, I think it was like $300,000 worth of repair that needed to be done to, structural components of the dam and fixes that needed to be made to the gate. And this is just sort of fixing it as is, not doing anything to improve its function or resiliency. So, they'll be looking at, status quo repairs just to kind of fix everything as it is, with updated costs for, today's construction realities, which is much different than in 2017, as well as, some of the improvements that need to be made to these dams to make them function better for things like flood control and be more resilient. So that's the east and the west. We went to the Seabright Dam, which the town had recently done quite a bit of work on in 2019, or actually, no, it was 2018. So there was a major leak at the Seabright Dam to the gate. The gate needed to be completely replaced. And the upstream side of the dam, the wall, there need to be pretty significant work done on that. So divers had to be hired to do a bunch of different, structural masonry repairs on the Seabright Dam. When we went there, we were sort of explaining to Kleinschmidt and Interfluve the May 6th storm. So at one point, the water levels were so high there that water was getting into the powerhouse. It was flooding over into the powerhouse, as well as going along the side of the powerhouse that's closest to Coastal Mountain Land Trust.
Mhm.
And this is something that when we're on site, we can show you exactly where the water is flowing. And that's a real sign of like a dam that's about to fail. And if that one failed, it would be really, really dangerous, that one or the other two. A big contributor to that was the fact that there are these things called flashboards, and a bunch of our dams have them. And the whole goal of flashboards is to raise water levels. So people that live around that, we call it the Seabright Pond, want water levels to be high, kind of just like anybody who lives around, any other part of the watershed. And so the flashboards are put up to retain more water, but really they're supposed to break when there's high water levels and high flow. But just over the years, that kind of knowledge of the purpose of those flashboards and the fact that they are supposed to fail periodically throughout the year to release more water, so that you're not having situations where the water runs to the other side of the powerhouse and undermines it. That knowledge had been lost. And so at some point, people got annoyed with the fact that those flashboards were breaking. And so they drilled rebar into the side of the dam so that the flashboards would never, the pegs would never fail and they'd never break and more water wouldn't be released. So, that's a problem. But it conflicts with the the other problem of people who live around that impoundment coming to expect a certain water level that they would like maintained. But on top of that, there are a lot of other, options in terms of making Seabright more resilient so that when we have storms like May 6th, we aren't just relying on, the flashboards breaking how they should. There's other things that we need to do to upgrade that so it's more resilient. So I guess the point being, I think that there's a perception that the high hazard dams are okay. And they've been functioning fine and we've gone all this time with them the way they are. And that was perfectly fine when we weren't receiving the amount of rainfall in such a short period of time as frequently as we do during times of year when we never experience, rainfall to that level. It's very rare to have like a, early June, late May rainstorm like.
Or
the one
December
we had.
23rd.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, these are all, problems with the realities of the new sort of climate change that we're experiencing here that, we're gonna have to upgrade those dams pretty significantly. It's gonna be huge levels of investment. We were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars just with status quo repairs that sort of patching up what we had, making them resilient so they can function properly and they don't fail and they don't end up in catastrophic failure. We're looking at, more in the millions.
Since they are high hazard dams, is there federal funding for that? None
No,
at all.
no. Unless we do fish passage, then we
That's the
do.
only requirement. That's it.
Yep. That is the goal. That is the federal government goal. So that's really important, I think, for everyone to understand. Like this fish passage isn't just we're doing it because it's chasing money. Like there's real investment that taxpayers are going to have to bear if we aren't committing to achieving other federal grant goals.
Audra, what do you feel the role of this committee is in providing recommendations for those particular high hazard dams?
I think it's like with everything else, like as a committee, have you decided that fish passage is important? Have you decided that resilience is important? And then, making recommendations based on those goals.
Okay.
Do you see a benefit to us reaching, like, decidedly making those independent decisions, like coming out with a resolution that says we as MERCAC recommend that we support fish passage and then move on to then step 2?
I think that would be helpful. I think, if you do think it's important and you do think that the resiliency goals are important as well, there could be a whole list of, different goals and values associated with the watershed and how you'd like to see it managed, or the river at this stage, all the way from, the harbor to the lake, that you all, if you determine them to be important, coming up with some sort of resolution saying we find these goals to be important and, based on our support of these goals, we make recommendations of X, Y, and Z at each point where you need to. That I'm just giving you a suggestion for one.
No, that's
Many ways to skin this cat.
Audra, when you were up there with Kleinschmidt and Mike Burke, your description a few minutes ago was more than a little sobering.
Yeah, it was sobering for us when we.
So how much time, in other words, there was an expert who spoke at the library this past week. He, for some reason, apparently said something, hurricanes are not such a big deal for us.
oh, good.
But rain
Rain
is a really big deal. And given that we had a number of storms last year, is there a timetable? I mean, if we don't do anything in the next year, is the Seabright Dam, for example, quite possibly going to fail?
I wouldn't say it's going to fail because at this point, we know how close we were to that being a real problem and how, you know, how, what that looks like now. We didn't know what that looked like before, and we also weren't able to go there and be like, oh, but like, look at that water running around the other side of the powerhouse. That might be a huge problem. So now that we know that, we can do things like, you know, do a fix so we don't have rebar as pins holding up flashboards. And that's something, you know, we know that we can, you know, we need to open that gate, because that gate, we don't open it because typically there's so much capacity with that spillway because it was enlarged, that we didn't have to worry about that happening. It's just that storm was so incredibly significant that, actually, I do think it was the December 23rd storm. I don't think it was the May. I don't think it was the May storm that did it.
No,
I think it was-
really bad.
Yeah, I think that was the one where that happened. So, you know, we know that we can open that. We have a few other things that we can do at the Seabright now that we're not in immediate risk. But I think, you know, in terms of planning for the future and, you know, the storms that we know are gonna come and that we're experiencing more and more of.
So there's some short-term things you could do
Yeah,
until there's a permanent solution.
right.
And I would imagine that the sluiceway with regard to the Seabright impoundment is a lot more effective at regulating that. You can probably draw that down a lot faster than, I mean, your impoundment is a lot
That was
smaller.
one thing that they did say, is that gate, you know, you can open up the gate, it will help a little bit, but it's still
But still
not.
undersized from what it should be.
Yeah, they were saying maybe like, one of the things they were talking about, and again, it'll be more helpful when we have the report, and we can go through it all, and we can also go on site and look.
Mhm.
They talked about either enlarging that gate or installing another gate, so you had two that you could open.
Mhm.
I do think that probably the most important immediate thing would be, making sure that we have flashboards that regularly fail. They talked about, other options, like, it's kind of like for lack of a better term, it's like a dam before the actual dam. That you build sort of like a wall up, and that would, you know, allow for us to maintain the sort of pond levels, and then when that gets breached, it goes over to the reduced height, Seabright Dam with no flashboards anymore. So there's a number of different things that we talked about and looked at that we could do.
Why isn't like a nature like fishway, like removal being considered?
Oh, at the Seabright,
Yeah, so like.
Yeah.
Dam and setback.
that one, I think it's completely because of a desire to maintain that pond.
The residents of the.
Yeah,
Because what was the elevation? The elevation difference is about like 35 feet. So at 5% runout, it's probably like a quarter mile or half mile type thing.
But if you build in structures like as far up as the no-go zone, for instance, like there's that part of the impoundment that you can't recreate in, which is down from Sure Tail, where, it's just like too hazardous, you might go over the spillway or something like that.
yeah,
No canoeing, no swimming. If that were, built up with structures and rocks and boulders and that sort of thing, I don't know about it, but I mean, it was like a 12-foot drop at Kennebec, and they were able to do that plus some other dams that were downstream by starting way upstream with their nature-like construction.
yeah, and I think another part of this, while we were looking at the dams, we were also the fish passage as well. And Mike said something about, it's the side see, this is so much easier when we're on site and we're able to say, it's that side. The side closest to, closest to the woods and the main waters property and the park and everything. He was pointed to, it was almost down near the pump station where we would start the fish passage, so it could be pretty gradual and I mean, it's not as good as like a Kennebec style nature like Fishway, but it's pretty, like, we have really good options at Seabright for fish passage because there's so much space there. And we talked about like, could it be on the side with coastal mountains, because that would be the best sort of like educational opportunities because it's near them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're really good. Like it'll a good fishway. There's plenty of space for it. Land doesn't need to be acquired. That one's a pretty, that's an easy one. East and west are a little more difficult. The West Dam, actually, that is a perfect place for that Cenebec style rock ramp, fish passage. So anyway, that's all gonna be part of it is, these are the modifications that need to be made to the dams to make them more resilient and function. How they need to for flood control and controlling water levels and stuff like that. And then these are the fish passage options that could be done along with it.
Do you have any expected date of a report from Klein Schmidt on this?
I just asked Mike about it this week, so I was hoping that I would have at least the field notes from that and some like rough costs. But they weren't ready for today, so.
Okay.
You know, I think it's all like the final version of all of this is gonna be part of the final report for the entire grant. But we should have some other pieces of it, so everybody can look at it sooner than that.
Do you know what metrics they're using for this resilience plan? I mean, for sea level rise, we look at, by 2050, 1.5 sea level rise predicted. But for this kind of thing, it's harder, I think, to predict rainfall amounts. And
Yeah.
we know it's been 16 inches in the last 100 years. Are they looking at the next 100 years, 50 years? Are they looking at gallons or rainfall inches, or do you know any of that? Like,
I don't, we did talk about this a little bit because it's kind of like you can't, the 100-year event could impact different segments of the river and different portions of it, depending on, where it falls in the watershed, how quickly it falls, all of that. So we talked about like using, 100-year event, 500-year event.
but with the new metrics, or could
Well,
100-year flood event, even 10 years ago, was very different than 100-year, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Has that shifted, or?
I think they'll be,
I know it's really.
I think they'll be using like the FEMA, this is, the 100-year, 500-year, or the
Okay.
probably 1%,
Yeah.
probably, all that kind of stuff, as well as inches in the rate in the watershed, like, we're getting better data on, if you have 1 inch that falls in the watershed, it raises like lake levels by X amount, that kind, that
Yeah.
kind of information.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be a combination of that goes into the recommendations about.
Okay, I'll be curious.
And also we need that for our own emergency action plan purposes, because it made us realize like our EAP and how it's written doesn't line up with the reality of like, okay, well, if you see water going around the powerhouse, that means you need to do these 5 things to protect everybody downstream.
And you're
And
probably
those-
too late.
Right, yeah. And if those 5 things don't work, then this is when you need to start informing people that they need to evacuate if they live along the river, wherever.
That was gonna be my next question is, do we have some kind of emergency signal, but I guess it's the alert. Town alert.
Yeah, we do have it. It's just, I'm not confident that we have good indications of when we need to start informing people
Right.
and preparing, to, do what we need to do to.
And it counts on everybody being signed up for those alerts too, doesn't it?
Well, I think there's a siren somewhere. Yeah, and then there's this whole like plan when, if anything happened that, emergency services personnel would go around and start evacuating people and, yeah. But again, it doesn't match up with, in my opinion, the actual signs that we would need to look for, that there's, that a dam is gonna be breached, or there's, gonna be like a
Indicators
catastrophic
for the
failure.
next thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect.
Okay. So no, I don't wanna like scare everybody, but it is serious,
Absolutely.
So will somebody be working on those indicators as part of this project?
we said to them, we need help with this because, I mean, there's just so much. There's just so much that you don't even know to ask unless you spend a lot of time learning about all these. And, you know, this has been like a 7-year process of me finding this out little by little, me and the public works director and all kinds of other people. Little by little, understanding what we have, how it functions, what are its deficiencies, what are the, you know, the sort of future conditions that are going to impact how it functions and how it can fail and, you know, what needs to be done to fix it. Like it's, and I'm sure there's still so much more that we don't know. And, you know, there are people who came before us, everybody did their best, but I don't think anybody had the opportunity to think about this as, in as much detail as we've had it, because we have the resources to through, you know, these grants and these studies. So
It also didn't seem as pressing back then.
it
Right.
did, yeah, the weather wasn't like it is now. You're right, it wasn't as pressing back then. But I mean, that being said, you know, there were big floods in 2005, 2006, where people were sandbagging, you know, the east and the west dams. And then come to find out, like, it was very well intentioned. They were really trying to sort of protect from flooding, but they caused some, like, sandbagging them is caused structural harm. And Klein Schmidt said, don't do that anymore. So I mean, you know, everybody, they're just, it's not like we had, you know, past information that we could bring forward to try to figure out how do we manage these for the future. Because in the past, it wasn't fully understood and it wasn't necessarily done correctly. And the future conditions don't match up with the past reality, but that everybody was managing for. So we can, and I'm just giving you the high level,
Yeah.
not a lot of detail, not a lot of technical, oomph behind what I'm explaining to you all. And, you know, when we get the reports back, you know, detail about saying.
Can we have the executive summary too?
Absolutely. Man after my own heart.
It's illustrations, Rick.
Picture, moving pictures ideally.
And yeah, and I do think, you know, as soon as we can get out there for everybody to take a look, it'll be so helpful. To be able to point and say, like, look at this tiny little spillway versus Seabright and, you know, what it needs to look like to actually have.
So it makes sense to set a date for that sooner rather than later.
I think it'll be more pleasant for everyone if we go sooner rather than later. Yeah.
So this discussion feeds into the next thing, potentially, which is, everybody knows that we're having public meetings on the 22nd and 30th, okay? And I sent out, a question, I think I sent out this question, didn't I? Should these meetings be about resilience or just about the dam, meaning Montgomery Dam? So that question kind of impacts where we're going with our meetings.
I think we have to include more than just Montgomery Dam, because I think it's important to understand, at least to some level, if whatever choice you make here at the mouth of the river affects what's happening upriver one way or another. So I think being able to explain that as well as possible in terms of what needs to happen with those next steps, what the funding is, I think that's important to include. I think people have been asking a lot about, you know, okay, you remove Montgomery Dam, what's next? You still have X, Y, and Z up the river, you might have not succeeded in anything, so doing it in isolation, I think that there would be a lot of questions still unanswered, in my opinion. Oh, yeah. My impression was we were gonna start high level, explain the bigger picture, the need for this whole project. You know, what are the vulnerabilities, the costs, those kind of big level issues, and then explain, you know, and the Montgomery Dam is really important in this because X, Y, Z, and then get into all of the different options.
And when we're up here, you're saying that the full watershed is in that overview?
I think it has to be. Yeah, I think we have to be, because people, if people, there might be people there that have never thought of this or looked at our website.
Oh, yeah, no.
So we have to think about that and do a high level summary, why we're here, why this matters. What, again, what are the vulnerabilities, the costs, the issues, the funding is another really important part of this.
Yeah.
Because like you said, fish message. But we don't want, it's tricky because we don't want to spend too much time on that, but we also, there's a lot of information and people really need to know, I think, some very important details. And then we can get into the options for this, for the Montgomery Dam. Go through those and then allow time for, I don't know if we're gonna do, questions at that point, or then we split into the groups thing but.
Well, let me interject here,
Yeah.
that the point of this agenda is that we walk out of here having some idea of how we're gonna proceed in the next 2 weeks to get organized for the meeting. So to that end, what you're starting to talk about is the format. And Deb and I have been talking about that format, and one vision that we had, which is kind of outlined in the next piece there, and this is really, I'm just bringing it to the committee, is the idea that people would come to the meeting, get a brief introduction of like who we are, what we do, what this is about. Then we would have stations where they could go and learn about the big broad topics that we are bringing to the community. The downside of that is that we can't ensure that everybody hears the same, well, we can't ensure they hear the same, but we can't ensure that we're communicating the same thing to everybody. That's the downside. On the other hand, it feels like a way that people can pace their own absorption of the information. Do you understand what I'm talking about with the format?
Yeah, I guess I struggle a little bit if this meeting. I'm a little more selfish. I view this meeting as for us. This is
Okay,
for us to leverage the individuals from our community that are there to help us make a decision and a recommendation. I don't think it's about us trying to educate them on some future vote.
Yeah.
And so I view our committee and I'd love to hear a discussion on this topic, but I don't think we should provide a recommendation to the select board that we don't think would be approved by voters.
Tyler, I've heard you say that before, and I've been puzzling over that. Can you just unwrap it a little bit for me? So why would we want to do that? Why is it important to take that into consideration?
I think, in an effort to make our shed better, I think we're looking at making some changes to it. If we recommend changes that would not be approved by the voting base, then it's all for naught, I guess.
Well, but the vote, I mean, the select board can still put something forward and the people can vote on it at that official vote. It doesn't, the connection I'm missing is between our recommendation and what the people finally decide. I mean, we'd like there to be language.
How will we know?
Hmm.
How will we know how they're gonna?
I think that's what this meeting is
That's right.
for.
That's what he wants to find out.
I wanna have people in there, I mean, for the same reason we should kind of, I mean, I've been slowly going around to my neighbors, understand their gut feel, and this is our chance to. Here's all the information we've learned. We're gonna help educate you on this. Based now you're a knowledgeable person. How would you vote on this?
Can I
Along
just
the
be
comment
honest, you're
cards,
never gonna find out from community meetings or talking with people.
No, you're not gonna be 100%,
The
but
comment cards would give us that kind of information. If we follow the format that was sort of laid out, as you ask, which of these do you prefer? What do you like about them? What would you change? And those questions we'd still have to design, but you would get information back.
I think it's ultimately, I mean, we're here representing the community. We should be in touch enough with the community to provide a recommendation that the community should accept.
But we also have all.
I realize I don't want to go back to like, I wouldn't use our national politics as an example, but I mean, it's kind of,
That's kind of
But
what
the
I'm thinking.
community's been missing out on some key facts.
I think
And I
educate
think-
them with the facts, but I think at the same time,
So
if
as
you
a,
have a subcommittee
but
that
as a
provides a
community, we can be
recommendation.
straight on the
Wait, let him
facts.
If you have a subcommittee that, you know, from a federal standpoint, if you have a subcommittee that recommends something that's so
Off the mark.
off the mark that when they present it to the whole body, it just gets voted down. It's,
Yeah, I totally understand.
I think you would rather, I guess I would rather see, if your objective is to create fish patches on the river, which I think it might be, Seth, I'm not gonna. But if.
I would
and
love
you-
to promote
and-
that first.
But I'm just saying, if your objective is to create fish patches on the river, and your recommendation and the thing that goes to the voters is to eliminate all the dams, and the voters say no, and you end up with some, would you rather have had a system with some dams lowered and other fish patches? Would you rather have, like, instead of all or nothing, would it be better to have some fish passage?
Right, so it's.
I don't know.
But it seems like we haven't said clearly as a group that the Montgomery Dam, the reason why all the energy on Montgomery Dam is because it's the holdout structure on an otherwise go-ahead fish passage project. We've got fish passage solutions at East and West. We've got them at Seabright. Sounds like there's some creativity going around the other privately owned ones. That's all, and basically, there are legal mechanisms in place to force the town of Camden to put the fish passage solution that works for the project that they're gonna do at the town's expense eventually. If we don't get.
Tyler, what about, I mean, the committee, we're gonna make a recommendation to the select.
Sure.
The select board can not move that forward.
Hmm.
They can say it doesn't make sense. That's not what we support. And so they'll come up with their own.
How likely do you think that would be though? I think,
I don't know.
I mean, I would think that if we've been doing this for 2+ years and we make a recommendation and some of the members of that are here right now, and then they took it and did something completely opposite, I think that would be a little startling.
Well, not necessarily opposite. They might take parts of it.
Gotcha.
But I've been on committees that made recommendations to the select board and basically were ignored and we didn't work for 2.5 years, or whatever. That could happen.
It could, but I don't think it's gonna be ignored.
No,
Because there's a lot
I
of
don't
debate
I don't think so
on
either. Right.
I see Tyler's point, and I see
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to all, I think all of us agree that we care a lot about what the town, the residents have to say.
Mhm.
But I don't think our recommendation should be based completely on what we hear from the citizens from 2 meetings where maybe we get.
Oh, I
People,
agree,
you
but
know.
I think that's what I guess that's actually what I'm trying to get out of the meetings.
Yeah.
I'm trying
Yeah,
to,
and
I'm
it should
trying to
be,
educate the people that are there and
Yeah.
then get feedback based upon
Yeah.
how we've educated you.
Mhm.
What do you think?
Okay.
What's your gut?
I
See,
would
that's
hope
an important,
it
just
should
because
support us, but not inform completely our
And-
decision.
one thing I wasn't sure if I was following you on, so that you just said that there is, you're saying there's an educational component to what we're doing in these meetings. It's
Oh,
not
I
to
think-
go out there and scope what these people's uneducated or undereducated positions are.
Correct,
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
yeah.
And another thing I think is gonna be really important is that, there are a bunch of people that just aren't really engaged with this because, they got other things that they're, more interested in. And I think it's gonna mean a lot, whatever recommendation comes out of this committee, because you were assembled for the purpose of, really doing a, sort of having a deeper understanding of the project and spending a lot of time, gathering facts and just getting a good idea of how it all fits together and having that broader perspective. So I think that, when you do come up with a recommendation, there are people who are gonna trust it and it's gonna matter to them. And the reasons behind the recommendation, like Deb said at the meeting the other night, are gonna be really important as well.
Yeah, and we've said that pretty consistently, that part of our thinking involves knowing what the public
Sure,
wants, not just because it's what they want, but because they have brains too.
sure.
They've thought about it, and as long as we've given them an adequate amount of information to see what the different issues are, and then weigh them as best they can, then that's important information for us. Because we're not setting ourselves above them. And it's a piece of the information we haven't gotten enough of. So I'm totally with you there.
Yeah.
And that's, I definitely want that to come out of the meeting, which is why the questions on those comment cards are so important.
Right.
And knowing what we're going to do with them, how we're going to tabulate them, and what we do with the results. Because we do have a space of time between the two meetings. So we could maybe do something slightly different with the information. But crafting those comment cards and making sure that they're distributed in the right way and collected is going to be a critical piece of it, no question.
Can we return to LP's original framing effort here, where you basically were saying, correct me if I misunderstood, we're gonna say, hi, here's who we are, here's what we do, and then break. And that's option one.
That is
Option two would, I think I hear is, hi, here's who we are, what we do. And then here's a broad overview, and then we break?
I don't know.
Is that the sort of
we can
binary?
discuss that.
Okay, all right.
So, because Deb and I mostly had talked about this format of a brief introduction and then letting the people walk around, and then at the end have a way, and we haven't really figured this out yet, a way to get their thoughts, impressions, questions, whatever, at the end,
But
as
part
they
of,
walk in.
but part of that introduction was what we talked about at the beginning. Do we want to present as part of our introduction that we've set up the information and we're hoping they will think through the broader context of this, the full watershed and the relationship between the Montgomery Dam and everything else upstream, not beating the bush with it, just making it clear that our hope is that they will think about these things in terms of the entire watershed. I mean, that's sort of not exactly where we started tonight, but that was one of the initial questions. And there seemed to be generally agreement that we want to talk about the full watershed, not just the Montgomery Dam.
And is that,
Oh, I
I
think.
just want to make sure I'm hearing
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
You haven't said
consensus or disagreement. Okay.
No, but that's part of the introduction. I
Okay.
was just trying to explain
That's good.
it.
About view sheds, is view shed doing any of this anymore? Or, cause we spent 2 whole meetings, I think at least, going through everything they were gonna do. We went through the whole community meeting. Is that,
We went through
I
that.
thought we already made all these decisions.
Elke and I went through that
What?
framework.
So are
Which is
they
here.
going to present all the work they did at all?
No.
They're not, they're gonna.
So
finish
we're doing
their
the
design.
present. Who's?
But there's other experts, I think, that we could invite. But Viewshed, my understanding is Viewshed is gonna come up with
So-
another set of diagrams, scenarios. And then if we want, depending on the stations that are set up for information, there are some people around this table who have a fair, really good amount of information and knowledge, who can answer some questions, but there are also other experts. People, for example, who showed up at that first open house that the town had, over on Harbor Park, and others that you all may know. I mean, if we're not comfortable manning those information stations and answering questions, then we'll have to find people who are.
I think that,
So yes, Courtney, it's us. That's the.
Right now, until we supplement ourselves. Other people.
Okay.
No,
I
you
didn't fully
can't go out of
understand
town.
that they're complete. I mean, what's disappointing is that we did so much work to figure out what this meeting was gonna look like, the presentation, what was gonna go into it. So I don't wanna lose all that. And I think we made a lot of, I thought.
which, yeah, we do
decisions.
have the outline of what their presentation looked like, so I think we can,
We have the outline.
follow that outline and.
Yeah,
Well, what you have under question 2 is basically a rewrite of that outline. But they had specific points of information, tables, they had certain things identified. And we can certainly look back at those. It was presented by LP and me this way to give us a chance to think about it freshly.
I think I'm a little confused on what, if we just do an intro and go into stations, how much are we including in the intro? Because I feel like there needs to be a decent amount of description of what we know at this point. So that if there's a question and answer right after that, then maybe one person's asking a question that 10 people have, and they all get to hear the answer at once, rather than every person individually answering. If it's at stations, it feels like it could be really time consuming to not have those questions and answers being done as a group.
Well, and that's why figuring out what's in the intro
Right.
is the place to start. How much information do you want in there?
Do you mind if I interject for a second? I think what I tried to summarize what you guys were kind of going around, and this is what I have in there, is that, because you mentioned people are concerned about hearing the same story for each thing and making sure they hear the same facts. And if I were presenting, and I'm not, I would say something like, we've been asked to come up with a recommendation. It's right on the purpose statement.
Yeah.
On this. We've been asked to come up with, it's the why are we here?
Yeah.
And then what would we like to do? We would like to share what we've learned based on this set of facts and keeping it in facts. And these are our considerations. And these 3 scenarios, whatever they are, and a basic description of what they do. I think, to me, that's a decent lead in, fact-based, semi-brief. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, that's about what I was saying. That, to give the level set to everybody. This is
How
what we're
does
going to
that
do.
not focus the whole meeting on the Montgomery Dam?
That's a good point, because those diagrams are, but how does it not focus on the Montgomery Dam? It's because that's the first purpose statement, right from the MERCAC website that says we're here because we're supposed to provide recommendations to the select board for preserving and improving sustainability and resiliency of the Megunticook River and its watershed. It doesn't say just the dam. So back to the question that was earlier, what should the committee be focusing on? The purpose is written on the homepage of the MERCAC thing, which is the whole thing.
Right, well, maybe I didn't hear you right. It sounded like we went right from that quotation from the purpose statement into explaining the 3.
No, I think what I probably was a little quiet on is, we would like to share what we've learned. Whatever, I didn't contain it. Based on the facts, and these are our considerations. And then these are the scenarios that we want to.
The 3 scenarios.
Yeah, whatever, I'm just.
And I think
I'm
part of
just
the,
throwing it out as.
What if we just did town hall stuff? The committee, like in a panel in front of a giant map of the watershed. And we just talked.
Well, at least with putting the whole water, it does. Again, the intent, what's written in here. The intent.
I think we need a PowerPoint presentation that's showing the whole map of the watershed, the basics of the dams, why are we here, the needs, what are the issues? There's resiliency issues, there's costs, there's maintenance, there's the, flooding that's in the future, and there's all these issues, right? So we put out the issues, maybe that's one slide. Another slide is, funding, where we can get funding. Well, there's funding if there's fish passage, blah, blah, blah. And then, the goals of MERCAC, of course, who we are, what we're trying to get out of the meeting, the understanding. And at some point, I think we should definitely break for the different tables, because, in planning scenarios, I work in planning and we do this often, and it's great to have a big presentation for everybody, but not everyone learns that way. So you can try to present like the general view, and we can also, I think, talk about the different options at that point. And then when we break, at that point, people can get closer to the diagrams and they can ask questions one-on-one, and then we'll also give out, paper that people can write questions on or comments. And we could also, break it up so that people can have discussions with each other, which I think a great way for people to think out loud. That's how I do it. So yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's what I kind of gleaned from the other meetings we were having, that that's how leadership is going to do it as well.
So if we were to do an introduction such as that, would that be, are you sort of thinking maybe half an hour, 20-minute PowerPoint? And then
I think, yeah,
splitting up
15, 20, it depends, but yeah, 15 would be good.
And can that PowerPoint be down and dirty and like, because people don't have a lot of time.
Yeah,
This is the problem.
Well, how long is this? It's an hour and a half?
Yeah, 90 minutes.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think 15, do we want to open up for questions with the big group or just?
I think the big group opened it up and said, so everybody hears what the questions are and here's
Yeah,
the
I
answer.
agree.
Yeah.
And then do small.
So the questions might take another, what, 10, 15?
well, and why questions before we have people break up and actually dig into the information?
Well, that's interesting.
I mean, I would think. Yeah,
So then come back together at the end?
It's tough to know.
as this, yeah, this
We don't know how
large
many people are
group,
coming.
knowing how
10
large
people.
events
Yeah.
happen with this topic in this community, I'm anticipating a big mess.
Exactly.
And people commenting instead of questions. That's.
Yeah, which I think
This
should be clear that, I think it should be clear, and then we should be outlining that,
Yeah.
that what we're seeking is questions specifically, and there's a time frame in which you're allowed to ask. You can't just get up and speak forever. I mean, I don't think we can manage that in a big group setting, so I think it has to be a quick, clear question, and that's, the way I would personally do it is a presentation where you have one slide that basically is saying what you said, like, what are the things we're looking at? What have we learned so far? Here are our 3 sort of general scenarios that we've put together, acknowledging that they are a work in progress and they're not a finalized vision. And then open it to questions. Or I would say actually a 4th step would be letting them know what the upriver implications are for those 3 steps.
Yeah.
And then done, questions. Would be my way I would do it.
Before or after the breaking up into the,
I would do questions then, but then people can go to the stations and learn more if they want. I mean, I think some people after that amount, they'll feel like I've got enough, I can scram, I don't need more. But,
Which way do you think people could vent? Because that's gonna be part of it.
well, right, but I think the people who want to vent would say and do the stations.
Yeah, that's where to Rick's point, doing the stations and getting more information and then coming back together, like when you're in a conference or whatever.
Mhm.
Isn't that sometimes the way that those big conferences are done? You do your little, you get your level set, you do your breakout group, and you come back together. And it is an interesting point on how to handle if people are unruly or taking up too much time.
I think there's a difference between a breakout group and stations to come speak, come sort of go on your own, because I think what you're saying, like a breakout group, there's a time frame for it, and there's a clear, what are you, like, a question that group is working to answer and then come back together, whereas I think if you go to the stations, there's potential for one person to engage with the person at the station for the entire time. I just feel like,
Do you still need somebody at the stations? Can you just have information displayed?
I think we can all be at the stations and help people. Yeah.
the question here. Somebody with expertise, maybe on the payroll, making all this stuff, like the PowerPoint and.
From the town manager.
Well, I don't know, it's like,
We can help you make all the, I got a day job, all the stuff,
help us make.
make materials.
Well, I think
PowerPoints and.
FB's already made a
the
lot.
environmentalist gonna,
Great.
And that's the question I'm.
Infographics, and we can use the website, and but who's gonna take it on is the.
Well, who's
2 weeks,
assembling and
like-
saying, here's the thing you're gonna do over here,
who's
here's.
doing the 4 science projects, is that up and
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Was it the Pathways Committee, Audra, that did the thing up at the middle school back in the spring with the different stations? After the Snow Bowl, there was the Snow Bowl weekend thing where they did presentations up there. And there were different stations, and then Jeff did something at the middle school.
Oh, yeah, yeah. it was
With that, I mean, how did his stuff get created? Did they just take it on
They did
themselves?
it, yeah.
Oh, to
But
be
everything will
self-employed.
help us, won't they?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I mean,
They
Whatever
as
we
soon
don't
as
have
soon as you
already.
figure out, like, what you wanna do and how you wanna do it, we can help put together the materials.
So to answer Rick's question, do we need to have a smaller group come up with what the station should be, the formats for that information, and then email it to the rest of us? I mean, I don't see a group even as small as this being able to come up with a really clear plan for how to do this.
So I'm just imagining that everybody has a life between now and then, and you all get super busy, and it all falls to me. And I go with a flip chart and markers, and we do it roughly like what Chris said. I repeat the purpose statement, and I tell them a little bit about, the possibilities that the committee is considering, and I get a deluge of feedback, hopefully.
Keeping it really, really, really simple.
Well, are we going to incorporate the history of what Audra has shared with us about what happened in previous iterations of this fish passage project didn't work out because of lack of community engagement? We're all dancing around the same issues, and we can't decide if we want to show the 3 Montgomery Dam options, or if, we want to talk about the whole watershed or that sort of thing. It's, there's really something that's just not progressing about this. Like, we're being kind of, we could right now decide on the stations and who's going to man them perfectly well.
I was listening in a thought statement.
There's no doubt. I have the utmost confidence that if we can't, we can deputize the expert. But can we take questions from the
I
public? Or do we
appreciate
vote
if we
people?
just let somebody here talk, because I am very interested in your meeting and I want it to be successful. And let's say there's 200-300 people there. And I'm a short person, and if I don't get in front of that station, I'm lost. And that has happened to me at other public opportunities. I can't hear, I can't see, I'm frustrated. A half hour's gone by, then we all go sit down, or I'm at the stations. I think the idea of having, and I would like to hear the whole presentation and the synopsis of what you folks have been working on and what you know. That would be valuable to me.
So maybe just a presentation and question and answer and.
Yeah, well, the stations can be, we could have like 6 stations with similar things,
People can
double them
maybe
up, so
see
you can,
them.
yeah.
But if
But
there's
just like
200-300
maps and
people,
no presentations, I at the different stations, it's just like visuals.
That would be
and
auxiliary visual.
It's just good for people that want to get closer to
and my
it.
question also is, what is your second meeting? Is it going to be a duplication of the first one?
Yeah, we just picked 2 different dates and 2 different days of the week in the
Make it
hopes of
work, yeah.
capturing as many people as we could, yeah.
Tell me the second, if the first name's a colossal failure, it might change a bit.
You'll learn.
Oh, no.
I think if we do focus on that first make the main presentation good, solid,
Yeah.
and not get distracted by stations. Maybe the stations, like you indicated, are more some additional media that's already created that
Yeah.
just needs to be plotted out larger and put on the wall that's available for people as they're milling around, or at some point to.
Yeah.
Like your different PowerPoint slides.
There's a lot of great stuff out there
To your point.
that are part of different reports and other slides.
So we could have a questionnaire for people to, some people really like to think hard about things before they,
Yeah.
answer. They're taking time doing that. Meanwhile, somebody else has no interest in that and they want to go look at the maps and learn more. And
Because I think
There's
we as a
different
group
things
could
we
create a presentation that was refined and
Yeah.
appropriate.
I agree.
We just have to be really disciplined. An hour and a half is such a short amount of time. And think about
Yeah.
every meeting we have ever had. We always run over. We get to 6:10 for a meeting that was supposed to be over at 6. And then the public hasn't even commented yet in the post-public comment period. Yeah. I don't know how we do that.
Yeah, hour and a half.
Complaining again, but
Do you want to?
Because we also have to give them time.
Yeah, the dam broke, go ahead.
And clearly stated and so forth. I've attended and been part of a number of charrettes before. Normally they work in pairs. So the same people that go to the first one come back to the second one because you can't get it all out in one meeting. And the meetings generally go, because, you know, you're talking about meetings going long and so forth. They generally go 2.5 to 3 hours. And what we're trying to do, I think, is get as much impact and as much involvement of the community as we can. And so to give them an opportunity, and I like the idea of, you know, having a presentation at first to get things started. But when we break into small groups, typically they come back and report. And when they report, sometimes there'll be the same things from different groups. And you just say that, you know, if there's a group leader then is taking all of these notes down, and you end that first meeting or you end that first charrette with all kinds of ideas that the town has come up with and so forth. You don't try to give all the answers and everything. You go back to the second charrette, and that's been, you know, the experts or those of you who know what's going on, assemble all of these ideas, organize them, and if there are questions or outstanding questions, you have the answers ready so that when the second charrette comes up, all of this disparate stuff that's come out of the groups and everything can be shaped and fed back to the community so that they understand what they've talked about and it's been organized. And they really feel like they participated. And you've learned in the process, you know, what was on their mind. You've had a week to, you know, consider it, and then you sort of give it back to them for their final reaction to it. And that's what you're left with, you know, the community, a good sense of what the community feeling is. And they're going to be different ideas. But the idea that the community gets together and talks those out in a small group sort of, you know, it creates a sense of, I'm really involved in this. If you got questions, they're not going to be dismissed because they'll be answered in a fairly detailed way, at least in the second charrette. So I would think it would be good if you considered perhaps using the 2 charrettes, not as 2 individual ones, but as a whole process to report this. Works good that way.
Thank you.
In fact, I didn't know any other way of doing it until if you're trying to, I think if we're trying to cram too much in one charrette, people are gonna go away frustrated or still have questions unanswered, that kind of thing. And I think you can prevent that by doing a 2 charrette process, in a 2-step process.
To do that, we'll need a meeting in between.
Well, one of the reasons we're having separate meetings is so that if somebody can't make it on the 22nd, they can come on the 30th, so that's another issue.
But if you have the introduction the same with the same facts, and then you said, yeah, hey, you know, we
Come back.
understand
Next,
that people might not have been here. I in fact won't be there on the 22nd, because I've just found out today I have to be in Ohio. 21, 22, 23, but, having then that little bit of, hey, you know, the same introduction can happen, and then it's still the same deal of this is what we learned, and there was incorporated some stuff from the last one in case you missed the last meeting. We're gonna go over a lot of the same content, but maybe it's further away, this expressing is more refined. Expressing that you're taking the community involvement into consideration is probably good for everyone to hear. It's as you mentioned, that was a nice way of saying that the people are involved, you know, by being part of that process. That's kind of an interesting, if it, you know, just thinking that you probably will need a meeting in between the two to decide on what things went well. You know,
I'm busy.
slight adjustments, there shouldn't be a huge adjustment.
I mean, I feel like a charrette, per se, is a very like professional thing that
What is a
we
charrette?
know how to do. I'm not even sure.
I think it's French.
But I'm worried that we're taking on something that is, because I agree, that would be lovely. That would be the end, that would be the best.
How close should
But
we
we
get?
have to work with what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and can we go back to something that you said a while ago, Deb, that kind of slapped me in the face? And I think I hinted to this before, but no professionals are gonna be running any component of this, question mark.
That was our
We're
understanding.
not professionals.
No, but we have been involved or working amidst professionals
Yeah.
over the course of our lifespan here. That seems odd that now when we're
Oh, yeah.
going public.
I'm sorry, that was
Kicking out to the curb.
Yeah, I'm a little.
They were like, you can do your community meetings.
You do.
It
Yes.
is,
I don't really
Yeah.
understand what
Our
happened.
budget is up.
Anyone know
And we're
what-
not changing
they
that.
ran out of money,
And, yeah.
So view shed and FB.
yes.
And so now we have 2 weeks and I have a day job. Everybody's
what about
busy.
Mike
Like, are we
Burke?
seriously doing this
So
ourselves?
Mike Burke is available, but
Cause he certainly has a lot of expertise that are necessary for some of the.
So that's actually one of the questions on the agenda is whether or not to make, ask him.
Whether or not to go through it.
Um,
Well, this would be in my line of work, when I talk to my people and say,
Yes.
where's the evidence you're gonna give me to
Right.
produce and do the thing?
Yeah.
I look at what they give me and I say, well, we need to settle.
Yes. Yeah. We don't
I
take
do not
this to court.
understand.
I think going back to the very beginning, and honoring Tyler's concern, major concern. If we were to find some way to do a charrette, and the Orton Family Foundation has made an incredible business out of doing that, and they train people to do it. But even if we were to do it, how does the kind of information back, the feedback that is important, how are we going to know in any systematic and important and usable way what the public thinks?
Yeah, that's the other big piece.
I mean, how do we get that out of that kind of a process? I don't know. I can't begin to think about how we do it.
Yeah, I do have to say that concept is a little more anxiety inducing to me, but.
No, and I've been involved in some great respect for people who run,
Yeah.
Right.
great respect. But they don't just come out of the
Exactly. That's what I'm
alley
trying to
and
say.
say, oh, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Let me
There's,
do it.
there's the well-paid component that is really the excellence just.
But I am worried about how, if we were to do it, how we get to what we said at the beginning of this meeting we want, which I think we still do, which is some idea of, after all this information and all this talking, what people actually want to happen.
Right.
And if we don't get that, how do we move forward?
What else do they want to know?
Well, that's part of that. I mean, that's the first step, right? What do you want to know? And then you tell them that.
Mhm.
And then we want to know what they did with that.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, please.
This is just one of many, many, many community engagement efforts that's part of all this. I really, really urge you all to go back through and watch those meetings, read the transcripts. If you really want to know like what people are thinking and feeling about this, there's just the Watershed School did summaries of all of the community engagement that was done in 2021 and made recommendations.
And
There's
that's
a-
easy to find.
There's a
Yeah, I
lot.
have a copy of the letter that the watershed, I don't know
Yeah.
if I looked at that, but that the watershed
But
students.
also the presentation they made to the select board is up there.
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about before, you know people, you talk to people in the community, like there's gonna be like, look at this as one input of many that you're gonna use to get lots of different feedback from lots of different places. Like, I think the idea that this has to carry all the weight of all of the community feedback you're just putting a lot of pressure on yourselves and a lot of pressure on these two events. When there's been so much work that's done already, there's so many informal things that you can all do. Like it is really important to go out there and do this. But I think if you're looking at it as like, this is the thing that's gonna give us the answer as to what people think, then you're gonna kind of set yourselves up for a little bit of disappointment.
But it would be the most current.
most current,
And my-
absolutely.
I mean, my experience with people that I've talked to in town is they really don't know anything. And so the piece that I feel we're doing here is giving an opportunity, 2 meetings, for people to at least know what it is we're talking about and the large parameters over what we're discussing and get an idea.
Induce some sympathy or empathy in them for us. Trying to deal with
I think it can be that simple though, really. I mean, I think I agree with Audra that I think we're creating a little more stress around it than it needs to be. I mean, I think it really can be that we give a presentation on what we have been doing and what we've learned so far.
Yeah.
And then engage with question and answer and
Yeah.
gather as much information as we can. And to the point that Seth has is that, yeah, none of us really can make this our full-time job. So to try to make it be more of an event with not really the time to make it that way, I think would just cause a lot of stress for
I agree.
everybody rather than feeling like, okay, if we can really put together a good presentation that we all feel good about, and then just have that be what it is.
Yes.
And I think that would feel less stressful for
But
everybody.
have a lot of visual information out there that
That-
people
yeah, that's
can
cool.
look at before they have to come to the question.
Yeah, that's fine.
One thing I've been thinking about, because I, do this for my day job sometimes, is getting to a point where we can get people in groups to talk about the different dam options. So it's tough if there's 300 people. I don't think we're gonna get that many, but maybe. But I think it really helps people to come together in groups and discuss options. And we could even have, somebody writing down, the group's ideas about what the best option is. And
Would we
then
have to
come
do that
together.
at those meetings? Couldn't we do it afterwards?
Well, what do you mean after?
In other words, after these 2 events, couldn't you then have a series of meetings, small group discussions?
Sure, but this is more, immediately after we explain what the 3 options are, people getting into groups, having a narrator or, facilitator of the group and writing down what people are thinking and saying. And it helps people to think through the options. What do they like? What do they not like? And then afterwards coming together as a group of all of us and maybe allowing people to talk about what they came up with. What do they like? What do they not like? What are they thinking? It's just a brainstorming activity. And I don't know if that's something we want to do or if we want people to write down their thoughts and submit them. Like, how do we want to be informed about the options?
I think the idea of a comment card was a nice idea. I mean, I think if we're gonna do something where we break out into small groups, we have to have a really clear agenda to what are we actually doing in those small groups? I don't think you can just break into a small group and have it be directionless. I mean, I think you'd have to have,
Exactly. You have
like,
to
here's a
question.
series of questions that we're trying to answer as a small group
Right.
and go back to.
And a scribe for each group.
Yeah.
Right, and this meeting is over in 35 minutes, and we don't have another meeting between now and then.
Exactly. Yes, I was gonna say, we need to.
So maybe we have
figure out what our
subgroups for, one is the PowerPoint presentation, one is the breakaway, whatever that part is. And have we decided what we're gonna do after the presentation? Do people care about that?
After the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I mean,
I
we'll have
think it's
questions.
quite
but then-
possible you could use up the entire hour and a half in just questions and answers.
Yeah.
But I mean, I totally agree with that, because if we're looking at 3 options, it's the options that we're always referring to. If that's shorthand for the 3 options that we're thinking about, what we've seen at Montgomery Dam,
Mhm.
then it's always gonna be, well, what about upstream?
Right.
And then it's always,
Well, I think that's where, a little bit of the on the what have we learned thing. The points that Audra was making about, these are these other dams and there could be a solution or there isn't a solution for something that has to be done to whichever ones. Just to give people, again, that level set, saying, okay, these are the 4 or 5 whatever it is, dams that we can back. And these other 2 dams here are personally, and then we've got this one down. And just to get to at least educate, to let them know that, okay, we're thinking about those things. And,
that there's fish passage solutions for every other dam. And
There is,
maintenance,
yeah, whatever there is.
maintenance plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to make it clear.
Research.
Within, Yeah, it's not to do with 1 or 2 slides per, but like those main fact-based points. This is what is needed. This is what can be done. And yeah, I think you'd want your breakout groups to get an understanding of that. Like what you guys have done before on the values of what's important. You know, is it the fish thing? Is that what's important? Is it cost?
And do we
Is it
want to
both?
talk about, like, we'll gauge your interest in what options we have for Seabright and East and West when that time comes?
You know, I'm getting a little nervous about the idea that we also want people to get consistent information.
Is it messy?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm nervous about the breakout groups. You know, just whether or not one person has that information off the top of their head or whatever. So in some ways, I'm feeling like the PowerPoint and then panel and then answer is, I think,
Yeah,
just they're going straight.
I'm coming around to that too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that,
And I do think we ought to move toward deciding.
yeah.
I think
We're gonna
also
talk this
it's really
together.
important for people to have time to look at questions on a piece of paper and answer them. Some people, I mean, everyone has different learning styles and thinking styles. I think we have to think about that. And I think it'd be great to get people to submit like a piece of paper with their thoughts on it. Otherwise,
we
we'll
could do
just,
a postcard.
we'll just
kind of
hear
thing.
from the loudest voices in the room and people who aren't afraid of public speaking.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Different modalities.
yeah. Yeah,
We have-
do we want to take the question?
Be very quick. Can we just get rid of the word charrette?
No,
I agree.
I think we're not, it's not.
No, it was not usually good, we're not.
Call an open public meeting.
Yeah.
Open public.
I did not
already
picture that on any of our.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
know
public-
the
public
marketing
meeting.
material for this is that plan.
It's
Yeah,
more
public
than just the words. I think, I mean, there's a lot of decision,
Yeah.
tough thing too, to put this together, but.
Yeah, I-
have to keep the emphasis on it being, you're listening to the public.
Yeah.
I disagree. There has been almost no public input in this whole entire process. As an outsider coming into town, very interested in the whole thing, to get my voice heard about anything is very difficult. I'm retired. I have the time to try to do it. So this needs to be an open public forum where you listen to the public. That's hard to do.
Okay.
To me, a charrette is exactly that. That's exactly the device that you use to get to hear back from the people. And it seems to me when the small groups, when they report, you get somebody in the group, you don't, it's not one of us, somebody in the group that's selected to come up and talk. And there's a feeling if they have enough time to go over this material in the small groups that they actually are participating. And there's something about the local people, each one presenting that shows that it's really a community effort. We've got questions. And I think if we try to answer all the questions in one meeting and then do it all over again, I think that's moving too fast. I think when I've seen charrettes work, there's a team that takes the questions where they're in writing and they are put in writing. Usually there's somebody on a board as the groups report. The ideas from the groups get put on the board. And in between the 2 weeks where, the first and second meeting.
I tell you what, since we've got limited time, we will come back to you if we need to get.
Then you've got
Okay.
So are we close to agreeing that it basically has 3 parts? An introduction, with lots of information supplemented by visuals throughout the room. An opportunity for people having heard and seen all that to ask questions and have them answered. And then getting information back from the people about, and the group has to decide, do you want to know just about their decision about the Montgomery Dam? And if so, same questions could be, what is your preference? What do you like about it? What would you change? Or anything else? And then that's it.
Yeah.
It's an hour and a half. It can be done. We'll have data that we want. And we can improve the information presentation for the second one if we learned that people had questions or concerns about that. I mean, I just don't think we have the luxury of planning anything more
Yeah, I
elaborate
agree.
or
I agree.
requiring any more expertise. We just don't.
So for the questions part, what are you thinking? Like, we're gonna ask the people questions
Well,
from
what we
the
want to know.
stage or whatever?
Microphones, badass.
Or we're just gonna have, like, what you were saying, have a breakout session where people get in groups and they answer the
I
questions
don't think
together.
there's time to do that. I mean, I've done that.
Okay.
Yeah,
And my experience makes me very skeptical that we can pull that off with an introduction, questions for everybody, and then breakout. I just, in an hour and a half.
So the idea would be presentation, questions and answers, and then maybe 10 minutes before being done, you hand out the cards with the questions, so people have 10 minutes to sort of write their answers down and give them back.
Something like that, 10 or 15 minutes.
What they come in.
Sure enough, yeah, I'm not married to the time. Yeah, that's totally fine.
Some people.
So we give them space, 10 minutes or 15 minutes to answer the questions, talk amongst themselves, go look at the different, whatever we have up.
Well, the
Is that
hope is
what
they've
you're-
already looked, because that happens at the beginning.
Good point.
Wait, what do you mean?
A good point to what you were saying is that when the people come in the room, that was, I don't know, what time the things, let's say. But you start your presentation at 6:10 or 6:15, give people time to.
No, I mean, that's an idea I haven't thought about, but, I was thinking, presentation, we gather everybody together, have the presentation, and then we're answering questions. That might take what? 45 minutes or so to do that part, and then we have for another 45 minutes. What are we gonna do? Are we gonna, then I was thinking at some point, breaking up and letting people breathe and have space to talk amongst themselves, to answer the questions, maybe 6 questions we have. They can do it in groups, they can do it individually, and they can wander the room looking at the different maps and talk to us. We're gonna be at the different stations in case they have questions about very specific things. And then we come back together as a big group and ask questions, or they can ask us questions,
Like a 15
and then
minute
kind of
intermission.
debrief.
15-minute intermission, an hour.
Yeah, getting space for people to like think and talk amongst, I don't know. This is what we do a lot in the planning world. I don't know if that's what is appropriate for this.
Can I volunteer to put together the first draft of a presentation, get it out to people by next Monday?
Yes, you can.
Awesome.
Yes, please.
What
Oh my God, thank you.
what time are these meetings starting? So 6 to 7
It's
today.
6 to 7:30.
One would be,
Yeah, there's a lot of, there's so much good material starting.
well, but I mean, what I got from you said is the PDF version. I mean, if we didn't have their actual like PowerPoint version, it's already
There's
Yeah,
all,
exactly.
mostly built, which would be.
Is anybody gonna say no to Tyler?
Yeah, some of those charts are.
I'm happy to help,
If
too.
you're good at it.
But then when we see that, we'll have a better idea of what sort of visuals.
that way you can start to throw darts at it and then.
It's easier to edit than it is to create.
Okay, good.
So we also have to come up with the questions we want to ask them, correct? Like a,
I think it can be basically the same 3 questions we were asked last time. In our meeting with.
Mhm. Meeting on the
Oh,
grass.
yeah,
yeah, that's a good point.
yeah, I mean, I think if people come in, you hand them a card, you give them 10 or 15 minutes to kind of walk around, look at the stations, and then settle in. You have a presentation, question and answer, and then they hand those in, give them 10 minutes or whatever at the end to fill them out, hand them in, and.
Those 3 questions.
Right,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's-
ideally, they're not filling those cards out before we do a presentation, because that should be where the
I think-
information gathering piece is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think presentation first, get everyone together. Who are we, what's going on, and then they can,
But if we
Break
wanted to
out.
let them do 10, 15 minutes of milling around the stations first to kind of
Absolutely.
acclimate to the concept, I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
oh, I
I like
don't
that.
know.
You know?
What?
You guys
I'm
okay?
afraid it's gonna be hard to correct.
No, I just don't understand the point. They're learning about stuff that's
Because
not
some
gonna
of
make
this
sense
we-
until we explain it, like, I think it's, if it were me, I'd like to sit down, be told a bunch of information, and then my brain will probably be on fire with questions, and
But you
then I
can
can
do
get
that.
up.
You
and
can
go.
do that. This allows anyone who has a different style
Mhm.
to do that. If you want to go in and look, and it'll be visual, but there'll be maybe some printed information sheets, because we have a ton of those.
Right.
And then 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes for people to get in, because people will be late.
So you
Yeah.
think people,
So you
but
think
people are
like-
gonna try to be answering these questions and they haven't seen our presentation yet.
That's
I don't understand that.
okay. They can
Wait,
keep
no,
their
no, no,
answer
that's
very-
not what I'm hearing is that, so I think the two options are that people arrive, 6 o'clock sharp and we start the presentation at 6 o'clock sharp with our PowerPoint. And then they're given time to look around at the visuals that we have and then they answer the questions. Or the other option is, that we give them time to look at the visuals. We start the meeting at 6:15, am I getting this right? And doing the PowerPoint. And then, asking for their feedback.
So wait,
Well, or
you
the
give the
questions.
question
The
after
questions.
the
So it's the
presentation.
question of I think the only thing, two things I'm hearing is, do we start with the presentation at 6 o'clock sharp? And then let people mill around, or do we let the milling around happen first?
Yeah.
And then start at
Is it
6:15.
I think 6:15 is a better idea, because some people will get there early, some are gonna get there right at 6 o'clock in church. and-
So we're gonna have to be very, very, instructive about, you're
Yeah.
here, we start at 6, there's things to read and look at, please take a look.
Our presentation begins.
Our
at 6:15.
Yeah, I mean, we can
Verbal
put that on a
stuff,
big whiteboard as you go, I mean, just
Yeah.
the order of events on a big whiteboard as they come in.
Yeah, okay,
Imagine walking in here, you're gonna take a look at the things that are on the wall and everything like that before the meeting begins.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we just need somebody who's good at being a
Great.
bully to get everyone to sit down, so I'm happy to help.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Okay.
if we get up on stage.
I have a loud voice.
Oh, yes, it's not-
Oh, good. We need one of
You
those.
wanna get to question 3 here, about who's gonna do what?
yeah, right, so who's gonna do what?
Well, we have an answer to one. Tyler's gonna write the intro.
And is that, so that's the PowerPoint, Tyler, that you're
Yes.
doing? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think already, Bina is already putting together visuals, for us. So our list of visuals potentially is somewhere on this.
Okay.
The separate sheet.
Second, I think it's the second, or my second sheet.
Yeah.
Does everybody see that? It's a map of the entire watershed, visual of the profile and elevation changes of the river, specific dams and their history, ownership, and current function. Do everybody see this list here?
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you look through it and see if there's anything, and I believe that FB has these things already, or they will be making them. So that is really just a question of somebody communicating with them and getting those things into the middle school on that day. So maybe that's two parts of that particular task.
So will Bina or anybody from FB be on the ground up here on either of these two dates? Physically assist with any of this stuff?
I'm not
I
understanding.
don't mean the lifting, I mean,
Yeah, I know.
Turning on lights in the cafeteria, making sure the AV, like the
I'll
system
do
works,
those.
like those things.
I want, and
Content
process.
and process. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think so.
I don't think so.
No, they can be if you want them to. I guess I just need to know exactly what you want them doing.
We might have another hour and a half, we need to talk this through to figure out what we want them all to be doing, but.
I mean, what I'd recommend, so you're gonna want stations with different information presented that's kind of like per topic. So we could get FB people to sort of man those stations and.
Like in the hallway outside Bisbee Theater?
Yep.
Okay.
Or
No,
you
we're
could
gonna be in
be
the cafeteria.
Oh, Cap,
We're in the cafeteria.
Oh,
I'm guessing
okay.
you're probably gonna wanna do the presentation now in the theater, and then you might want the cafeteria for like.
Yeah.
Presenting information and.
do we have access to that?
No, that's okay.
Yeah, because we need a
I've got
big, you know, AV
Yeah,
system and all
you're
that.
right.
So
We changed-
if you all give the presentation, we can have. I can organize people manning those tables. And maybe the way that you wanna do it is people who are comfortable public speaking and wanna stand up and ask questions. Can stick around and do that. People who wanna go and look at stations and talk to people more one-on-one. You've got FB people manning those tables.
That's
that
true,
can help
that's
out.
true.
And you folks as well, because some of you aren't gonna wanna stand up and present, so you can pair up with FB folks at tables and help.
So I had a
I'm
problem.
comfortable with that. that you just said than anything else we've described about this
Okay.
meeting so far.
And I had pictures using the Bisbee.
I
It
was,
sounded-
I was a planner and we did a lot of these types of things. So that's, I mean, that's what I'd recommend, because then you've got the public forum for the people who are perfectly comfortable standing up and asking their questions. They can be heard in a very public manner, but there are a lot of people who don't like doing that. They're gonna wanna go to somebody and have a conversation and speak more one-on-one. And so we can set those up. So-
Okay, in two separate rooms, so they can be going on
Yep.
at the simultaneously.
You don't want the presentation, I guess.
So the presentation will start at 6 then.
I would.
Or, I mean,
say
you could, yeah, you can do it that way, so you could start right away and.
I would do it at 6:15, just because that's the reality of when people are gonna finally go.
6:10.
That's just me.
It's like,
Which way? Go.
Yeah. Like, yeah, a few minutes.
So what you said about having tour, how
So they
they
can go to the cafeteria first.
They could.
so people know.
Here's our order for the.
Would
And then
we,
you're
would we
probably
gather
gonna need a-
everybody at the end for a final debrief kind of thing, or?
Be hard to do if we're in two different rooms unless.
It feels
the
like
first room
strange
moves
to just
into the-
Hold hands,
let it
everybody.
go, but. Yeah, I mean, usually we would bring back everyone together and have a, like a final discussion, but.
Sort of depends on how many
I don't know.
people.
If there's time.
Like kind of an awkward
So,
setup.
I don't know.
if we were gonna do it that way, we'd do a PowerPoint for
15.
45 minutes, with PowerPoint panel discussion, 45 minutes, 15 minutes of looking,
No question.
or half an hour of looking and answering questions, and then 15 minutes to gather again at the end of those that are left, because I'm sure we'll lose people.
But where, in that, where does the filling out the cards come?
Right, I'm thinking in that half hour, of looking at the stations. That's what I'm thinking.
And we have full access to all the middle school's tables and such that are, we could set up for all.
Yeah, what we don't have right now is the Bisbee, because I only got the cafeteria, but I'm sure it'll be fine, yeah.
At the bottom of that same sheet, there were 4 suggestions for the information stations.
Yeah, that's
Not
good.
in stone, but they were just, it was just a draft,
I like it.
based on what different people are saying.
That was just the back page of the agenda.
Yeah. this-
Okay. Yeah,
Yep, that looks good.
and again, with the, so like, and these are my concerns, because non-techie. Somebody will be setting up a laptop that makes it so that the story map of the flooding thing will be.
Boy, if I'm the techie, we're in big
Well,
trouble.
the middle.
And this is why I'm so anxious about this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel the same way. This
Once
is
we
big.
tell the middle school what we're doing, they provide tech support. If we ask.
Oh, really?
I think, I mean,
Like a
those people
laptop.
have to be paid.
Yeah.
Still have wrinkles.
I can bring my laptop.
Oh, I think they're gonna be permanent tech tonight.
Okay, so I've got to get those people,
Colin,
Thank you, Alfie.
might be calling, might be, there's 2 other people.
My,
What is the capacity that we can handle as far as a crowd? Yeah, it could be.
Oh, the Bisbee theater is
it's big.
300, I don't think it's 500.
Okay.
I think it's 300,
it's good.
Bisbee, I think, and
Yeah.
cafeteria, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Okay,
I mean, you were in there for the,
the busy one was in, yeah.
Right.
Seats there.
it's deceptively big. You know?
What about advertising for this or?
Oh, that's the blast. You just held it up.
Oh, she put it in the bag, that's a good thing.
No, I mean, but like, we need much more than just a flyer,
Oh.
right?
Well, right, but
Well,
Like,
Audrey
are we-
had said she could
This
do
is a
something,
good
right, on the
step.
town website.
It's there.
We put something in the newspaper?
And we can do something in the newspaper. The library has agreed to post one of those flyers.
Nice.
Yeah, just wondering, I wasn't sure, where on the, window or board or?
You know, where you have a TV thing?
Oh, yeah.
Can we give that to the paper and have them do something smart with it?
Well, we can
I
drop.
think I can give them a digital copy also.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't that be like kind of good?
And Ellen, if you'll give me one, I'll.
Yeah, I was planning on giving everybody a couple to put up something
Put up,
around
yeah.
town.
I'll take,
Thank you
I'm
for
going to
making
MRC
Spread them
at
around.
6:05, so
Yeah,
I'll take them with me.
perfect.
Is there anybody who would volunteer to be the interface with FB about these various things? I mean, I started the ball on that. It's just like the day of making sure that they arrive and they're in the.
Well, once there's a full list, okay, then.
So I'll draft.
How do people feel about Mike presenting? Like,
Oh,
sometimes
great
creates
information.
more doubt than
Yeah.
he creates.
No.
Yeah, he creates more doubt. He said he doesn't, I know he's like engineer speak, and yeah, he's like gotta be exact and perfect and precise. But he might be one that isn't.
I
the
think it
best
would be nice to
speaker.
have him on hand, just because,
Oh, yeah.
like, I mean, he's got so much
Yeah.
information, in his brain. I enjoy listening to him present, but I do understand that.
Yeah.
He's hard to understand. It's hard to.
It'd be great to have you questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aaron is very, Aaron wrote his name, something.
Oh,
Like,
Amen.
Amen.
David was at least motivated for another college.
Yeah.
I'll have to.
He was what?
So-
Motivated.
You knew it the
Motivated.
other
I liked him, yeah.
Okay.
But I
No,
guess
you-
they can't come anymore? I don't really understand what happened.
You can't come.
What, I missed it.
They can-
So we can ask Mike Burke to come, is my understanding. I think we got the panel, we got the PowerPoint. Then the other thing that's important is this gathering of after that meeting. We have to have some people who will go through these questionnaire things and make something from them that we can use.
Would it be best to do it?
Yeah, I can help with that.
Or is it gonna be too late?
That's a good
I mean,
question.
we
Because
can,
it's like, everyone's there.
it's not that hard to get some
Depends on how many we get.
help with AI and stuff, like you could, there's things you can do.
Okay, so. Deb and Courtney also, did you raise your hand for that
Yeah, I
one?
can.
Okay,
Will this,
We need to also come up with the questions, but we pretty much.
Well, we
know
don't,
what they
well,
are.
unless we haven't really agreed that we'll use the same three that we all were
Yeah,
given.
let's think about it a little more than that, but yeah, I think that's where we start, and then
Okay,
and we ask the group.
so if you want to talk about that, then we could send something out to the group.
Yeah, I'll do that. What would be, Deb?
would the presentation, the 45-minute panel, would that be on Zoom?
I would imagine it. I would imagine.
Oh, yeah, good point, we should have some Zoom,
Just that 45-minute.
well, the whole thing.
Presentation.
The
Well,
whole
the other
thing
one would be
Zoom.
tough, so, you know.
Yeah, well, you have to go
Billing
both.
about the cafeteria.
So do you want people to come, so would Zoom be a deterrent, like would people just all just watch it on Zoom?
It's kind of like that
But I do think-
C-SPAN, where you
I
just,
think we should have
I
it.
think we have to.
Yeah, I think we should have it. I think
Mm.
it's-
We'll get it
Yeah.
I mean, that-
Yeah.
I'll attend.
Very good idea.
So you guys, it's 5:46. It's time for public
Can
comment.
I make
know
one
we're
other
gonna
thing?
go.
I just want to encourage people, if they haven't already, to look at the document that you were sent from the library.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, I didn't.
That's a revised and it's done, I thought, extremely clearly. It's just important that we all are aware of what's in here.
yeah, it'll be important for us to be able to
Yeah,
tell folks this.
we'll tell folks, but also in terms of our own thinking.
Yeah.
Our own recommendation at the end.
I mean, would this be a display? And the.
I think it's-
Summarize what that is?
I think in talking with, and being in the library board meeting and talking with the group that put it together. I think it's good, it gives us a little feedback, but it's also. Like a little premature, it's hard because I think a lot of their concern was with the roughness. I mean, yeah, so their focus was. 90% on the seawall portion. And I think when we worked with Shed. We kind of gave them the direction of, don't worry about the seawall part, focus on. The bigger Montgomery Dam, bigger thing for this group, and so I think. When they looked at those presentations, they were kind of focused on seawall, and I think those areas were modeled quite roughly and
Right.
not. I mean, I think there was an option that had like an 11-foot high wall or something, yeah, I think it's. Yeah, there's some misunderstanding
That
of
was
the
misunderstood.
plus 11, but still, I'm just saying that I don't think. And I think we all agreed that. I didn't think the view shed renderings were very good yet.
No, they're being revised, right?
Yeah, and that's part of the next step, so that's why there's like.
I see.
Yeah, but I want to be careful because I don't think, I think that there's gonna be maybe a revision that would be ready to present at the meeting, maybe, but I just
Wait,
don't
what?
want anyone to hang their head.
I don't think, I don't,
Well, point. Wait,
Well, I don't think that's the whole point. I think you can,
I don't
think you
think-
can present things that are already.
These are big.
it's a really big, I
I,
mean,
Well, but we don't even know what those ones are yet. So even if we get a revision today, it still may have all the same questions. It might not be any better in our opinion than the ones we already have. So I think we can work with what we have already,
mm,
being incredibly clear in our presentation that these are works in progress. This isn't, scenario A isn't the end all be all for scenario A. There are working parts to every bit of it that you can be manipulated, but you can still,
Conceptualize.
yeah, I mean, drawings or not, you can still say, here are our three basic ideas of directions we would go. And go from there. I mean, you can have the seawall be 11 feet tall, or you can have it be stair-stepped stones, or you can have a bridge, or you cannot. I mean, there's so many components, and even new drawings aren't going to encompass
Maybe they
all of
can-
those different options.
Yeah.
So I think,
Goes a little closer.
well, I think it's, to me,
No, you're right.
like, it's.
Thank you for
that's
the
not
logic.
In piece for me, so.
All right, so we,
did you get an answer to your question that you asked, like, who was gonna, you started developing the tasks that we're gonna do between now and then?
yeah, I've got, Audra and, where am I? Tyler's doing a thing. We're all gonna be the panel discussion.
I'm happy to do setup on the day.
What's that?
I'm happy to do
I
setup.
hope it's set up too.
Oh, set up on the day. So,
maybe we can all
And break down.
do
to it.
that, yeah.
okay. And
Volunteer,
then
everyone?
people doing the work afterwards with the questions are Deb and Courtney.
And we'll come up with.
And who's
You- you-
emceeing? Like, who's doing the presentations? Anybody?
We don't know.
That we don't,
Okay, we need to still.
We need to,
yeah, we need to
Oh,
have,
yeah.
You asked
I need one too.
coordinate
I think we
with,
can
with
probably. split
FB
I think we
about
should
something.
cover that.
Audra and Deb will follow.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
Thank you.
Public speaking doesn't bother me.
I can be.
Ellen and I were just saying.
Never mind.
Volunteering to present? You were just about to volunteer to present, I know it.
What if it's split up?
Hey,
If we split it up?
we did a dry run in front of the select board, you and Ellen,
Yeah.
so. And it was good.
No, you both are really quite excellent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Ellen's already
Spew on it, just let it.
yeah, I'm happy to do some part of the presentation.
You're quite the team.
Let's figure out what the presentation entails, because
The,
there are certain
Yeah.
slides, like, I think Seth would be
Yeah.
certainly an expert if there's a slide there talking about what the current aquatic life looks like in the river and what it could look like. He would be a great person to address that.
Good point.
So,
So we'll
You'd
wait
be
and
great
see
at the
what,
options, the damn.
we'll wait and see what your draft
Yeah,
tells us about.
and what we revise it to as well, so. yeah.
We could each take a slide.
if you need like the dumb game show host guy, in front,
Oh, that sounds like a great.
as long as there's nothing substantive.
So you're happy to stand up and
So you
say,
can be the
well,
guy who cuts off.
Yeah, you start us off.
Yes.
Yeah. Because you do kind of need that.
Yeah, that's right. Platitudes,
You can set the table for.
shutting
everyone.
people up.
exactly.
We gotta do.
Okay, everybody shut up.
Excellent. See, you just showed you.
Yes.
We're helping you have some.
Yeah.
Yes.
Preview this, and I think this is wonderful. This is just what people have been wanting to hear. This is your chance to engage in meaningful discussion with MRCAC and have your opinions and ideas heard. Your feedback is integral to our process. That's just what people have been waiting to hear. I would suggest that you don't call it Q&A, call it forum. I felt a wonderful, because if you call it a Q&A, you're setting
want it.
yourself up as the people who know everything and.
Yes, 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 yes.
But if it's a forum, you really will get meaningful discussion. Thinking you have your word, that is just wonderful. 90 minutes, you know it's. We try to have 3 different parts to this. It takes 5 minutes to break from one part to the other to another. You've lost a lot of time. I would suggest, or several people suggest that maybe it's just a presentation and a forum. And then hand out the questions ahead of time, so throughout people can be. So you do get written feedback, but keep it simple. Keep it simple. Everybody be happy. So keep it. And I would also like to just point out historically, 3 years ago, there was a very remarkably similar presentation in which the public was invited. And that was the first time the public had been invited to give their feedback. And people were delighted to be invited. So be very careful that you live up to people's expectations, because the takeaway people had from this summer of 2021 was that the town was not listening, that they were not presenting more than one choice. They were offered options, just as you have offered various options. But the only option offered at that event was taking the Montgomery Dam down. So just be careful. If you are inviting people to give their opinion, make sure that they feel that their opinion has been heard. Because the takeaway from many townspeople in 2021 was that the town was not listening, and was not going to listen. And I know that, for instance, Save the Dam Falls group came together immediately after that public presentation, because people were so disappointed. They've been invited to a public presentation and then shortchanged. So,
Ken, can I ask you, what exactly was it that made them not feel heard in that there was an opportunity to talk?
3 things. There were town officials were going to be hosting the event. There was going to be a variety of options offered, and there was going to be a chance for feedback. And none of those 3 things turned out to be true. The people making the presentation had to back up and say, "Oh, we're not the chair and vice chair. We're just private citizens." And there was legal reasons for doing it that way. And instead of a range of options, there was just 3 different pictures of the Montgomery Dam coming down. So there was not a range of options. And then when people wanted to discuss the whole river, they wanted to discuss other options on Montgomery Dam. The chair eventually had to close the door and say, "No, we're only here to discuss option." But it was the option to take it down. So you can go back and listen. I think it's been reported about 3 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Those are the transcripts that I sent you all.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
I read that.
Yeah.
Is there any way that you can make it like 2 hours rather than an hour and a half? You know you're gonna run out of time.
Does it stay on the
I
flyer?
think you may already have it on your print.
I mean, we can plan for an hour and a half and just know it's gonna be 2.
Yeah.
We can change the,
I mean, if you're saying you're not gonna cut people off,
right,
because it's 7:30.
this always happens, yeah, at these.
Yeah, I mean,
so-
I think we probably wouldn't cut off if there are more questions. We probably would cut off if a person has stood up and is now just,
Well, lay down the ground.
yeah, I mean, I think there's some point to
Make
where,
ground rules. 3 minutes.
yeah, each person is allowed a certain amount of time. I think that's how we would cut it off, rather than
Yeah.
it's now 7:30, or you guys all are so raising your hands, we're out of here.
But I think it's also a good idea at the beginning, whoever is making the initial presentation before questions and answers form, how long a person has to speak.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Which will be Rick's job.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do I have the button that turns off the mics?
Yeah. Goes off.
But yeah.
No fact checking
We'll
allowed.
give you a
Yeah, with a blaring
I will be fact checking. And just, do we have any restrictions with respect to the custodial staff at the middle school?
I was just thinking that.
That
So the
might be-
paper that I signed said we would be out by 8, but I'm pretty darn sure I can amend that we need to be out by 9 or whatever.
Yeah, maybe put 9 as a,
Yeah,
Cause I think that'd be that's the only limitation I would think of.
Yeah.
Does that include breaking everything down and everything too?
I don't know, I don't remember the time, but it was,
I would do it to 9 because then take time to break stuff down, so.
it was like when do they lock the doors or something, not us. Anyway, so I'll submit that, I think that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, we're done.
I think.
Wow, look at
Got a job.
Yeah, so Hannah brought things together. That's good.
Oh, my God.